a boy ends up becoming the patriarch of a village where several beautiful girls live. Among them, there are different races, and all of them seem to like him quite a lot. In addition, he is also able to tame wild animals that, unintentionally, could easily destroy entire cities. Whenever he wishes, he can reach an absurd level of power, becoming practically the most powerful man in the world. This is the story of our protagonist, which curiously begins after his death, when he is called by a god who decides to talk with him about the life he had. For 39 years, he lived facing constant difficulties and many regrets. His journey was full of problems, betrayals from other people, and bitter moments. In the end of everything, his life came to an end when he collapsed because of a terminal illness that consumed his strength. Precisely because of that, the god decides to offer him a new chance to start over, something that leaves the protagonist quite confused at first. Then, the god explains that he intends to grant him a completely healthy new body, free from diseases. Yes, a body totally immune to any illness. Furthermore, this new body would also have a great amount of vitality and energy. At that moment, the god admits something important. In a certain way, the very hard life that the protagonist had ended up being his responsibility as well. For that reason, he considers this new existence as a form of apology. Upon hearing that, the protagonist accepts with ease. For him, the decision is simple. Soon after, the god asks if there is any special wish that he would like to fulfill in his new life. Without thinking much, he replies that he would like to experience living as a farmer in that new world. The god then comments that this matter belongs to another divine jurisdiction, something outside of his direct control. Even so, he decides to find a way to handle the situation. The god takes out a state-of-the-art cell phone. Yes, literally a cell phone, and makes a call. After talking for a few moments, he manages to get authorization from the god responsible for agriculture. As a result, the protagonist receives an extremely rare legendary tool, the omnipotent agricultural tool, something that only a chosen farmer could possess. After granting the young man's request, the god finally sends him to the new world. In an instant, he is teleported and wakes up in a completely unknown place. When he opens his eyes, he realizes that he is in a large forest. Surprised, he begins to move his body and notices something incredible. He can move normally, without any pain at all. Every movement feels light and natural, very different from what happened in his previous life, when he was always sick and weak. Just as a precaution, he remembers that he spent years confined to a bed because of the illness. Thinking about that only strengthens even more his desire to make the most of this new chance. Now that he has received this second opportunity, he promises himself that he will live as a farmer. He then begins by observing the environment around him. Quickly, he realizes that he is very far from any human civilization, exactly as he had requested. Everything around is covered by tall trees and a completely untouched nature. While examining his own body, he notices that he has become young again. His clothes also seem simple, like those of a common villager. Next, he decides to summon the so-called legendary tool. Suddenly, it appears with a quick sound in the air. To his surprise, the tool takes the form of a hoe. Without wasting time, he starts thinking about the priorities to survive in that place. The first thing he considers essential is to find water and also food before thinking about planting anything. Thus, he decides to explore the surroundings and, using his senses, tries to find some kind of edible plant. However, to his misfortune, he finds nothing useful. There are no fruits, there are no plants that seem edible, and, to make matters worse, not even a simple patch of grass. While thinking about what to do, something moves nearby. Worried about the possibility of it being a dangerous monster, he decides first to find a safe place to settle. After searching a lot, he finally finds a gigantic tree. Its size is impressive, and he decides that that will be the place where he will build his base. He starts by clearing a space around the tree. Next, he tries to look for materials to build something, but realizes that he does not find many useful things. So, he decides to dig a well using his tool. As he does not have the knowledge to create complicated machines, he decides to do everything manually. After digging a lot, he realizes that he needs to change the angle of the excavation. Digging diagonally, he finally manages to reach water in a small underground reservoir. This leaves him quite satisfied. Another curious thing happens. He notices that he does not feel hungry. This makes him wonder if the effect comes from the power of the omnipotent agricultural tool. Taking advantage of the fact that he still has a lot of energy, he decides to continue working on building his base. He spends some time collecting wood and other materials around the forest, always attentive in case something appears that could serve as food. However, even after searching a lot, he still does not find anything. With not many options, he decides to start by preparing the land for cultivation. When he cuts down a tree using his tool, he notices something impressive. The trunk is cut with extreme ease, as if it were a piece of soft bread. He even quickly moves away so as not to be hit by the falling tree. This leaves him quite surprised. Then, he decides to change the form of the tool to something that helps to work with wood. With that, he manages to cut, refine, and leave the trunks very smooth. Even so, carrying the trunks is still difficult. So, he imagines another form for the tool, something that helps with transportation, even without knowing the name of the object that he is imagining. Just by thinking about it clearly, the omnipotent agricultural tool transforms exactly into what he needs. The truth is that this tool is extremely powerful. With it, practically any task becomes much easier. Taking advantage of this, he begins to build a small cabin. While working on one of the wooden pillars, he notices that the shadow of the tree has changed a lot. Only then does he realize that he has completely lost track of time. He becomes worried because he still does not have any source of light. He tries to create something like a lantern or an improvised lamp, but he cannot make anything that works properly. He even tries to use an improvised lens like a magnifying glass to produce fire, and that even works a little. The problem is that it is already too late. The sun has already set and the forest becomes completely dark. With not much choice, he shelters inside the tree and spends the night there, working a little more and carving a wooden cup using a chisel. The next morning, he uses the cup to drink the water that he found. The water is fresh and very pleasant. After that, he finally manages to make fire using sticks and pieces of dry wood, thus ensuring some light and warmth. Now more prepared, he goes back to clearing the area around his base. Suddenly, however, something attacks. A rabbit with enormous teeth, much larger than normal. Even so, the protagonist reacts quickly. With just one precise strike of his sharp scythe, he defeats the animal. After that, he decides to cook the meat so that he can feed himself. While eating, he comments to himself that now he is truly living in direct contact with nature. Soon after, he realizes that something very important is still missing in any house: a bathroom. So, he improvises a simple toilet using a round log. However, when testing it, he notices that it is extremely uncomfortable to use something like that out in the open. Because of that, he decides to build a small wooden cabin to cover the place. He comments that a good bath is something truly irreplaceable. And in that, he is right. After dealing with that part, he turns his attention back to the soil. Using his tool, he begins to work the land to make it fertile. While doing this, he imagines which crops he would like to plant to survive: potatoes, onions, tomatoes, and cucumbers. However, there is an obvious problem. He does not have any seeds. Thinking about this, he ends up becoming a little discouraged and decides to rest. When he wakes up some time later, he notices something strange. In the soil that he prepared, seeds have mysteriously appeared. That leaves him completely surprised. He wonders if that happened thanks to the power of the agricultural tool, or if, in that world, plants simply appear on their own. Either way, now much more excited, he decides to protect his future crops. Like a true farmer, he starts by building wooden fences around the area. In addition, he digs small trenches around it, as if they were traps to prevent the approach of animals or monsters. While carrying out all this work, he also eliminates the giant rabbits that try to attack him. Thus, he manages to temporarily solve the problem of food. After that, he begins to carefully water the seeds that appeared, hoping that they will grow quickly. Deep down, he hopes that these plants are truly edible and not just decorative, because if they are not useful, all the work he has done so far will have been in vain. As the days go by, he finally manages to finish a very comfortable cabin to live in. The place becomes beautiful and well organized, but there is a small problem. He does not have enough strength to lift the wooden beams to the necessary height. Thinking about this, he uses his creativity and decides to dig the ground around the construction to lower the soil level, and thus gain height inside the cabin. In the end, everything ends up having a solution when one thinks calmly. After solving this part of the house, he begins to dedicate more time to observing his crops grow. Watching the plants develop day after day ends up motivating the protagonist even more, and he begins to enjoy every moment of that new life. However, on a certain day, something different appears nearby. Some injured animals show up in the area, resembling a mix between a dog and a wolf. Our dear Hiraku decides to help them and offers some boar meat that he had obtained earlier when one of those monsters tried to cross the fences that he had built. Upon observing more closely, he notices that one of the females seems to be pregnant and that, suddenly, she begins to show clear signs of suffering because of the pregnancy. Everything indicates that the birth of the pups is near, and that leaves the protagonist a bit worried. Without knowing exactly what to do, he decides to allow the animals to stay inside the cabin. While trying to think of some solution, he ends up keeping watch near the tree where he built his base and thus ends up falling asleep. The next morning, upon waking up, he realizes that one of the wolf dogs had already given birth to 4 pups. As a form of reward and also care, he offers the best part of the boar meat to the mother. Over time, he notices that everyone seems quite comfortable in that place. As the pups now occupy a large part of the cabin, he decides that it is better to build another house for himself, something bigger and better. Meanwhile, he continues taking care of the crops and notices that the tomatoes have grown a lot. If he had not harvested some earlier, the plants would probably have already turned into large bushes. While working on harvesting and cultivating the land, the wolf dogs begin to patrol the region around. They also start hunting rabbits and bringing them to him. Seeing how useful these animals are, the protagonist decides to give them names, calling the group Yuck. As a reward for their work, he also offers fresh tomatoes. In another place, the god observes everything and decides to check how the protagonist's new life is going. When he sees the situation, he realizes that he made a huge mistake. Without noticing, he had sent the Hiraku to the so-called Forest of Death, a place where S-rank monsters live, extremely dangerous and powerful creatures. Faced with this, the god even begins to imagine that perhaps the protagonist will return in the form of a soul to complain and demand more apologies. Even so, he continues to observe what happens. Meanwhile, Hiraku continues working normally. With his legendary agricultural tool, he manages to cultivate practically everything he imagines. Thus, he starts planting potatoes, onions, spinach, cabbage, and even bean sprouts. Something curious catches his attention. The plants grow much faster than normal. He realizes that this probably happens because of the powerful omnipotent agricultural tool that he received. Feeling more and more satisfied with his new life, he even decides to carve small statues of the gods as a form of gratitude. At the same time, his small area begins to look almost like a small civilization, as he continues planting more trees and expanding the place. We also see moments when he plays with his wolf dogs, although it is curious to think that those animals could easily destroy an entire city if they wanted to. Even so, he has fun throwing a wooden disc for them to fetch. While petting one of them, he notices something strange. Each one has only one horn on its head, different from what he had imagined before. The other dogs also line up to play with him. After some time, the protagonist decides to explore beyond the forest area with the help of his animals. During the exploration, they find a river. He immediately thinks about using that river as a new water source. The idea is to dig a canal to bring the water close to his house, although he knows that this will take quite some time. Even so, with his optimism, he believes that he will be able to do everything little by little. However, before anything else, he decides to build something simpler and necessary, a place to take a bath near the lake. While thinking about this, a curious doubt arises in his mind. Without toilet paper in that world, how would he clean himself? The question lingers in the air as he continues working. To make the transport of materials easier, he transforms his legendary tool into a wheelbarrow. While pushing the wheelbarrow with one of the dogs running alongside, he ends up going too fast over terrain full of holes. The result is predictable. He loses his balance and ends up being thrown forward along with a small companion. After returning home, he continues working like a true legendary farmer, now thinking about preparing for the winter. One of his ideas is to use the skin of the giant rabbits as a coat. Unfortunately, the plan does not work. The skin has an extremely unpleasant smell, something similar to rotten meat. The smell is so bad that he quickly gives up on the idea. It is at that moment that the dogs lead him to another place in the forest. There he finds a huge spider. Hiraku becomes confused when he sees that creature with a large body and a kind of black cushion on its back. In Japan, something like that would resemble an object called a zabuton. But soon he discovers something impressive. The spider has an incredible ability to produce threads and weave fabrics. In a short time, she creates a very beautiful patterned cloth. After that, the spider also heals from her own injuries. Impressed by that, Hiraku decides to allow her to stay in his village. He starts calling her Sabuto. Soon he discovers that Sabuto not only creates fabrics, but also manages to produce clothes using the skins of dead animals. In addition, she makes blankets and curtains that help a lot in dealing with the cold. Very grateful, the protagonist begins to feed her with various things. He soon realizes that Sabuto loves potatoes. He even decides to give her a job as a guard of the area. Thus, Sabuto begins to serve as a kind of alert system, always warning whenever something strange approaches the village. Even with all this, at certain moments Hiraku ends up thinking about his life and realizes that he has been feeling a bit lonely. He even comments that, if things continue like this, maybe one day he might even forget how to talk to other people. The next day, the pups disappear into the forest. The protagonist imagines that they may have gone away for good. However, while he was preparing his food, they all return quickly. He realizes that they had gone out only to look for companions. Some of them even seem to have fought quite a lot to get a partner. Soon after, Sabuto also appears again, but this time accompanied by several offspring. This reveals something curious. Sabuto was a female spider. Upon seeing everyone forming large families, Hiraku ends up feeling a bit of envy. That scene makes him realize once again his own loneliness. To avoid thinking about it, he decides to do what he knows best: continue working. At that moment, however, Sabuto activates the alert. The sound makes the protagonist worried, and the pups quickly lead him into the forest. There, he finds a girl surrounded by the dogs and the spiders. The young woman seems frightened and asks for help immediately. Like a true gentleman, Hiraku approaches to help her. However, at the moment he gets close, she takes advantage of the opportunity and tries to attack him, sinking her teeth into his neck. Blood appears, and she reveals her true identity. The girl is a vampire. The pups, obviously, do not let that pass. They throw themselves at her as a group, using a series of blows and attacks until they leave her severely injured, causing her to return to the form she had at the beginning. After all this, Hiraku looks at her and asks a direct question: whether she is truly his enemy. Then, after everything that happened, she ends up answering that she really did not want to hurt him. According to Rue, the problem was that the dogs attacked her first, and that left her extremely weak. While she speaks, all the animals keep watching closely, staring at the vampire in an intimidating way, as if they wanted to make sure that she would not try anything suspicious again. At that moment, we officially learn that her name is Rue, a vampire who ended up appearing in that place by chance. Even so, our hardworking man decides to help her. He says that, if she wants to recover her strength, she can drink a little more of his blood. Of course, she accepts immediately. Then, carefully, she brings her fangs close to his neck and begins to suck his blood again. However, while doing that, she comments, surprised, that she had never tasted blood so full of vitality before. It seemed far more powerful than anything she had ever experienced. After that, the protagonist takes her to his small village so that she can rest better. There, he begins to show everything that he has built, and especially his crops. To Rue's surprise, the place is quite impressive, and impressive in a positive way. After all, few people would be able to turn a piece of forest into such a productive field. He also offers a tomato for her to try. When she takes the first bite, the vampire smiles and comments that it is incredibly tasty and very juicy. According to her, she had never tasted anything like it before. Meanwhile, Hiraku continues showing other parts of the plantation and rings the alert bell. When they go out to check what happened, they realize that the dogs have captured someone. To everyone's surprise, it is an angel. Yes, a real angel. No one knows exactly how the dogs managed to capture her, but the fact is that they did. When Hiraku tries to help, the girl hides her wings and uses magic to clean herself. Soon after, she recognizes Rue and begins to demand explanations. However, after resisting a bit, she ends up being attacked again by the pups, who do not seem willing to trust her so easily. After everything calms down, when they go out to check what happened, they realize that the dogs have captured someone. To everyone's surprise, it is an angel. Yes, a real angel. No one knows exactly how the dogs managed to capture her, but the fact is that they did. When Hiraku tries to help, the girl hides her wings and uses magic to clean herself. Soon after, she recognizes Rue and begins to demand explanations. However, after resisting a bit, she ends up being attacked again by the pups, who do not seem willing to trust her so easily. After everything calms down, the two begin to talk and realize that they have something in common. Both have already been attacked by the same fierce dogs. During the conversation, the angel asks about the protagonist. Rue then introduces him as her husband, which leaves the visitor extremely surprised. Next, the girl introduces herself, saying that she is an aunt of the angel race. Upon hearing that, the protagonist asks if she serves directly under God. Rue then explains that angels are basically a race of warriors, more known for their physical strength than for their intelligence. That comment obviously irritates the angel. Soon after, we discover that she came looking for Rue because there is a bounty on the vampire's head. This happened after a major incident that caused destruction in a city. Rue quickly explains that the real fault was of an annoying noble who tried to force the production of drugs and medicines using her research. The angel also comments that Rue has the habit of reacting in an explosive way when something irritates her, which usually ends up causing trouble. The protagonist listens to everything and comes to the conclusion that maybe the two of them would actually get along. Rue then apologizes and admits that sometimes she loses control when she is irritated. This greatly impresses the angel. She also explains that she decided to calm down after realizing how weak she became after facing the demonic dogs. Until now, she still seems traumatized because of that encounter. After resolving the situation, the protagonist makes an unexpected invitation, showing the plantations and all the vegetables that he cultivated. Little by little, the angel becomes impressed with what she sees. However, when she ends up encountering Sabuto, the enormous spider, she becomes so frightened that she almost faints. Despite that, she agrees to help with the harvest. Thus, everyone begins to work together, harvesting cabbages and other vegetables. When they taste the freshly harvested food, they realize how incredible the flavor is. In fact, there is something special about eating something that you have grown yourself. The taste seems even better. While they continue working, we see the protagonist becoming tired. Then Rue and the angel use magic to purify his body and relieve the fatigue. This leaves Hiraku a bit envious, since he does not possess that kind of ability. Later, already inside the cabin, the angel becomes enchanted with the strawberries cultivated by the dark-haired farmer. Rue then asks again to stay living there with him. With a serious expression, she also asks for help, saying that her body alone would not be able to handle all that work. And so the days continue to pass. Everyone works together, building walls, harvesting the crops, and organizing the village. During a walk, the vampire makes one more request to Hiraku. She asks if it would be possible to plant even more strawberries in the future. Upon hearing the request about strawberries, Hiraku replies that even if they expand the plantations beyond the current fields, it would still be difficult to take care of the entire harvest every single day. That makes the girl, who loves strawberries, become thoughtful for a moment. While they walk through the village area, the protagonist notices that even more pups have been born among the wolves. To him, the place already looks more like a village of dogs than of humans. Thinking about that, Hiraku decides to build a specific space for all the dogs within the orchard area. He organizes the place so that it resembles a large stable, where the animals can rest and stay protected. As always, he tries to solve everything in a practical and efficient way. At the same time, some of Sabuto's offspring also begin to leave to live on their own. In just a few months after being born, several spiders were already ready to become independent, something that seems quite impressive. Even so, some of them prefer to remain by their mother's side. Continuing in the village region, at a certain moment, the angel comments that she will need to leave for a while, but promises to return soon. The protagonist becomes a little worried about that, remembering stories in which someone leaves and never comes back. However, this time the situation is different. After a few days, she really returns, and she does not come alone. Along with her appear several elf women. In fact, she brought them there with a purpose, to help with the work of the village, and they are not ordinary elves, but high-ranking elves. Each one of them introduces herself, and something curious draws attention. All the names begin with Rhea, as they belong to the same family. The angel explains that she decided to bring them to live in that place. That makes Hiraku think a lot about the situation. More people would mean more harvests, but also less heavy work for each person. On the other hand, he also wonders if that would really work. Then, the angel explains the reason for the decision. She tells the sad story of the elves. A long time ago, a war among humans destroyed their home. Since then, their race ended up spreading across the world, surviving with difficulty while searching for a place where they could live in peace. Upon hearing that, the protagonist becomes even more thoughtful and concerned. However, upon discovering their ages, he is even more surprised. The youngest is around 300 years old, while the oldest is already over 400. Even so, showing his generous nature, Hiraku accepts that they stay there. When the vampire introduces the wolves and the spider Sabuto to the elves, their reaction is immediate. Several of them end up fainting from fear. After all, both the hell wolves and the giant spider are creatures known for being extremely terrifying. Despite that, the work in the village truly begins from that moment. The first task is to build a large house for the elves, with rooms and even a proper bathroom. Meanwhile, we see Rocco cutting large pieces of wood with impressive strength, clearly showing why he ended up becoming the patriarch of that place. When the house is finished, it ends up being even bigger and more beautiful than the protagonist's own cabin. That even sparks a bit of envy in him, but in a light and amusing way. During a conversation, one of the elves comments that they use fire to cook and also eat meat. This greatly surprises the protagonist, who had always imagined that elves were completely connected to nature and fed only on plants and fruit. The elf then laughs and replies that underestimating nature is a serious mistake. According to her, anyone who does not understand that can end up dying quickly. That response shows that they have gone through many hardships throughout their lives. Over time, they begin to work on other tasks as well. Some start extracting minerals from the ground. Then, they build a furnace to melt these materials and produce metal objects, such as pots. This makes the protagonist very excited, because it means that the small civilization he is building is evolving more and more. At a certain moment, one of the elves subtly comments that, besides working, they could also help increase the population of the village. Upon hearing that, Hiraku replies that this matter has already been resolved, while noticing the curious looks from the other elves, who are also thinking about rebuilding their race. In another scene, we see all of them working non-stop. Now, the goal is to produce flour and bake bread. These elves truly seem not to get tired of working. Seeing so much dedication, the protagonist becomes extremely happy. After a long process, the bread is finally ready. Hiraku appears eating a piece skewered on a stick, clearly satisfied with the result. During the meal, he asks Rue if she knows who controls the forest. She replies that, in fact, the place does not belong directly to anyone, but the region is under the domain of the Demon King. That scares the protagonist a little at first. However, Rue soon reassures him, saying that since he built everything there alone, and without anyone's help, that territory basically belongs to him now. Later, at night, the elves talk among themselves and comment about Hiraku. They praise him a lot, saying that it is impressive for someone to manage to tame hell wolves, live alongside a demonic spider, and still maintain such productive crops. On the other hand, some of them also realize that the protagonist still knows little about the world beyond the forest. Meanwhile, he is busy making calculations about the village production and thinking about asking the elves for help to build a water canal that brings water directly from the river to the plantations. At another moment, Sabuto appears bringing good news. Together with one of her offspring, she captured a huge queen bee. The creature is so large that everyone becomes frightened upon seeing it. But Rocco has a brilliant idea. to build a small cabin for the bee to live in and produce honey. This once again demonstrates his vision as a farmer. At that very moment, the angel appears again and, upon seeing the giant bee, becomes terrified and runs away immediately. Meanwhile, the protagonist decides to begin the construction of an artificial lake that will serve as the base for the water canal. He asks for help from one of the elves named Lee. She asks what material the canal will be made of. Hiraku replies that he would like to make it out of stone. But in that forest, it is difficult to find such material. If it were made only of wood, it would probably end up leaking. Then he has another idea. Using his legendary agricultural tool, he begins to compact the soil with so much force that the ground becomes hard like concrete. When he realizes that the method works, he continues the work with even more dedication. Thus, everyone spends the entire day working non-stop. While the elves dig the earth, the protagonist compacts the soil and builds the foundations of the canal. After that, they also install a gate in the river to control the flow of water, while the elves take care of the excavation. Hiraku seals the joints and reinforces the entire structure. After a lot of effort, they finally manage to finish the canal. Now, the village has access to practically unlimited water. But the new canal also brings an unexpected surprise. Suddenly, a huge fish appears in the water and lunges directly at the protagonist. Without hesitating, Hiraku reacts quickly and cuts the fish into 3 parts with a single powerful strike. A short time later, we see the result of that. He prepares a dish of fried fish, accompanied by lettuce. The smell is so good that it makes everyone curious. Even so, no one has the courage to try it first, so they ask Hiraku himself to taste it first. He agrees and begins to eat with a happy expression on his face. Seeing his reaction, the others finally gather the courage and try it as well. And so, everyone ends up praising the dish, saying that it is delicious. Later, they decide to begin cultivating rice. After that, Hiraku decides to start a new project, building a rice field so that the girls can closely experience the wonders of rice. He guides them through every step, from planting to harvesting. Then, he teaches them how to dry, thresh, and sift the grains. The entire process requires a lot of effort, which even leads him to reflect on the hard work of farmers who produce their own food. After so much dedication, he finally prepares the rice and turns everything into onigiri. The result pleases everyone, but the girls eat with so much enthusiasm that they end up leaving the protagonist with nothing. Some time later, he notices that all of them managed to clean themselves using magic, while he had to rely on much simpler methods. Thinking about this, he decides to build a hot bath large enough for everyone. However, a new challenge arises: how to deal with sewage. His aunt suggests using slimes to consume the impurities, which ends up solving the problem efficiently. With that, the bath is completed. When he tries to explain how everything works, he ends up being surrounded by a group of overly excited women, which makes the situation somewhat chaotic. The next day, the dogs appear bringing another group of elves, who also decide to join them. With the growing number of residents, it becomes clear that they need a larger space. Thus, the group begins to build a new house, much more spacious and comfortable. The place now includes a room for the protagonist, a dining hall, a barbecue area, a storage space, and even a reserved area for reproduction, showing that they thought of absolutely everything. To celebrate the inauguration, the protagonist decides to prepare curry, introducing a different dish to everyone, with Leah helping in the preparation. While they cook, the aroma spreads and draws the attention of everyone around. When the food is ready, the flavor wins everyone over once again. But, as usual, the protagonist ends up with little for himself. With the approach of winter, they begin the preparations. They dry meat, build a cold chamber to store vegetables, and ask Button for more blankets. During the winter, to make the time inside the house more interesting, Hiraku creates several board games. Lucy ends up showing little skill in these games, while the dogs prove to be surprisingly good. Even so, everyone enjoys pleasant moments together until winter comes to an end. When everything returns to normal, Sabuton's alarm is triggered. Upon checking, they find a huge windbur advancing toward the farm. It attacks, but the girls manage to reduce the damage using a magical barrier. Determined to protect everyone, the protagonist summons a powerful spear and defeats the monster with ease. The girls are impressed by his strength. While analyzing the place, Hiraku questions whether there is a possibility that someone sent the creature. But the girls do not believe that. As usual, he asks if they can make use of the monster's meat, and everyone ends up enjoying a great banquet. Meanwhile, in the Demon Kingdom, Vissel, Radon, and Grygen become alarmed upon discovering that a small village managed to defeat a creature of that size so easily. Elsewhere, the Dragon King Drame also realizes that not even he would withstand an attack of that level. While these powerful figures think about ways to maintain good relations with the village, Hiraku realizes that something important is missing to accompany the meat: wine. Thus, he begins production, involving everyone in the process of crushing grapes while they sing and have fun. At the same time, the god responsible for sending him to that world is reprimanded by his daughter, the goddess of agriculture. She points out several problems in his decisions, including the fact that he placed him in a dangerous environment and granted him overly powerful items. As a consequence of his actions, he ends up receiving a severe punishment. Back in the village, the alarm sounds again, and this time they find Flora, Lulicy's younger sister. Upon discovering that her sister married a human, she is surprised, but after learning about his achievements, she begins to deeply admire him. During a meal, she becomes interested in tofu and, after understanding the fermentation process, decides to share this knowledge. Some time later, she returns accompanied by a group of ogres who also begin to live there. Soon after, the ant brings reinforcements, including assassin angels and lizardmen, which helps a lot with daily tasks. With more residents, the work becomes lighter. Hiraku realizes that many inhabitants of that world have simple culinary habits, so he decides to teach new recipes. Meanwhile, the angels patrol the region. At a certain moment, a woman arrives with more elves, and the protagonist decides to gather everyone to choose a name for the village, which comes to be called the Great Tree Village. Days later, they receive a visit from a messenger of the Demon Kingdom. It is Belle, who brings a gift as a symbol of peace. However, the protagonist misinterprets the situation, believing it to be a tax collection, and offers part of his production. Even so, everyone is satisfied with the agreement. Later, Drame also appears to strengthen ties and brings a valuable gift. Delighted with the hospitality, especially the wine, he shows great satisfaction. After these visits, the protagonist decides to build a proper place to receive guests, avoiding embarrassment. Instead of a simple house, the group builds a large banquet hall, with Flora responsible for taking care of the place during the night. The first visitors to use the space are members of the Hoang tribe, who come to negotiate. Despite not bringing gifts like other visitors, the negotiations go well. Later, Tia reports that the visit to their village was peaceful, despite some initial challenges. Over time, a proposal arises to send young members of the tribe to live in the village. When they arrive, it becomes clear that almost all of them are girls, with only a few boys who are still very young. This causes a certain commotion among the elves, who already begin to think about the future. As time passes, the new residents adapt, although at first they face difficulties. However, at a certain moment, everyone notices intense tremors, caused by two enormous monsters that are fighting nearby, indicating that new challenges are about to come. One of the angels warns the protagonist that a blood viper and a bear are fighting to the death, but instead of worrying about the danger, he can only think about whether those monsters would be edible. She then takes him flying to the location, and with just a single strike, he defeats both creatures without difficulty. Later, he decides to make use of the ingredients and prepares a stew using the meat of the bear and the snake, along with a roasted chicken. However, to his surprise, the taste turns out not good at all, falling far below expectations. Trying to improve things, he looks for Flora and asks for her help with a small preparation, which ends up being mayonnaise. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he also tries to teach her how to make miso, since she always fails in her previous attempts. After a lot of effort and a long process, the result ends up being excessive, with the miso overflowing. Shortly after, Lulicy appears to inform that there are new visitors. Upon meeting them, they discover that it is a group of dwarves interested in tasting the village's wine. However, the girls make it clear that nothing will be offered for free. The leader of the group, Donovan, explains that he does not have money, but proposes a trade. They can share their technology, since they are specialists in alcohol production and produce corn whiskey. The proposal is accepted, and they end up settling there. The protagonist, curious, asks if they are interested in any of the girls in the village, but quickly realizes that the cultural difference between them is too great, making the conversation somewhat uncomfortable. A few days later, while everything seemed calm, Hiraku spots a dragon flying quickly toward the village, showing hostile intentions. As he prepares to act, Drin intervenes and strikes the dragon with a powerful blow. However, before the situation is resolved, another dragon appears from behind, seeming even more dangerous. The protagonist tries to attack it, but misses the first strike. As he prepares to try again, a subordinate of Drame appears and stops the attack, explaining that they are the wife and daughter of Drastaman and Graphalon. They had become suspicious of the frequent nightly outings and decided to investigate on their own. After clarifying the misunderstanding, everyone apologizes for what happened. Last year's mother, influenced by Hiraku, decides to leave her daughter in the village for a while, believing that this will prevent further problems. Thus, last year begins to live with them. The protagonist starts assigning her various tasks, but since she cannot properly control her own strength, she ends up causing several accidents. Over time, they realize that despite this, she has great skill in dealing with people. Because of that, they decide to put her in charge of diplomatic matters. In her first mission, she needs to deal with Belle, who is completely surprised to see that, in addition to Bry, someone like last year is also part of that group. Even so, despite the initial shock, everything ends peacefully. Upon returning to the Demon Kingdom and presenting his report, he decides to also send his daughter, Florin, with the mission of improving the espionage system and ensuring constant information about any suspicious movement. As soon as she arrives at the village, she understands that she needs to properly introduce herself and also assess the impressive concentration of military power present in that place. While walking alone through the village, Florin approaches the protagonist, but ends up ignoring his presence by believing that he is just an ordinary human, someone without relevance. However, after talking with Last, she discovers something that completely changes her perception. That seemingly simple man was capable of defeating her own mother with just a single blow. Upon realizing the mistake she made by underestimating him, Florin feels ashamed and begins to treat him with much more respect. A few days later, the protagonist begins to feel like eating seafood. The girls explain that this is not easy, since it would be necessary to travel to the south, where cities specialized in that type of trade are located. Faced with that, Last decides to go there to establish trade relations, and Florin accompanies her, becoming responsible for organizing the trip. During this journey, they meet Michael, the leader of a merchant company. Initially, he becomes quite nervous upon seeing them, since he was prepared to refuse them. However, he changes his attitude when he notices the direct and sincere way in which they present their interests. Convinced, he agrees to negotiate and keeps his word, going personally to the village to deliver the fish to the protagonist. After returning, he admits that it was difficult to deal with the pressure of being in front of such powerful individuals. Shortly after, a dragon appears in the village and provokes the protagonist, but is defeated effortlessly. Then, she reveals herself as Hakurin, the older sister of Drame. She arrives irritated for two reasons. First, because Drame offered her niece in marriage to strengthen alliances, and second, because she believes that her niece should find a partner before her. The protagonist does not get involved in this type of issue and only focuses on repairing the damage caused. After that, everyone gathers to have fun with games. The activity quickly becomes competitive, and a bet arises in which the loser has to give up a piece of clothing. In the end, the result is surprising, and the one who goes through the most embarrassing situation is not who everyone expected, showing that knowing the rules is not always enough to win. A few days later, a group of Lamias appears asking for forgiveness and offering items in exchange. Since some youngsters ended up exploring and clearing the dungeon where they lived, the protagonist decides to improve relations with them through fair exchanges, involving food, precious stones, and other resources, in addition to reinforcing the importance of maintaining proper behavior. Meanwhile, in the Demon Kingdom, 3 young individuals of high status begin to act arrogantly and plan to attack the princess, believing that Florin is being held against her will in the village. However, Florin had already been warned by her father and anticipates this, hiring Lamius to contain this possible attack. With that, the invading group is stopped and taken to the village, where they must remain for a while. The protagonist then presents the village to the princess, who gradually realizes that that place does not represent a threat, but rather a peaceful environment. The other girls initially resist and try to escape, but eventually get used to the comfort of the place. Over time, the princess returns to the kingdom. While the others decide to remain in the village continues to grow steadily. They begin to send surplus resources to allies, receive help on trips, welcome refugee elves, and expand their activities. New situations arise, such as the discovery of a dungeon with a dangerous creature. Although the main focus continues to be survival and food production, the routine remains calm until Lucy discovers that she is pregnant, bringing new responsibilities, but without compromising the stability of the community. During this period, the ancient vampire Bargriv appears, showing interest in the sacred statues. Even without handing over an original one, the protagonist creates a new one for him, who repays by sending a valuable piano to the village. With the arrival of the instrument, everyone feels a bit hesitant to use it, which leads to the idea of obtaining another one in the future. At the same time, some changes happen in daily life, such as the reduction of alcohol consumption because of Lucy, which mainly affects the dwarves. Even so, they adapt and begin to focus more on the future. When the moment of childbirth approaches, everyone mobilizes as if it were a great event. After the birth, the protagonist meets his son, Alfred, and begins to reflect on everything he has built up to that point. He tries to better organize the village by creating a medal system for decisions, but this ends up generating more work than expected. Even so, everyone celebrates the birth together, reinforcing the spirit of unity. Meanwhile, in the Demon Kingdom, it is concluded that facing the Great Tree Village is not a good idea. Later, upon returning with a small group, one of the companions comments that many people have shown interest in moving there more than 100. In fact, faced with that, the protagonist decides to expand the village even further, building new houses to accommodate the newcomers. Gradually, that small settlement grows more and more, until it becomes something much larger, almost a complete kingdom. And thus, the story continues, marking a new beginning for everyone who decided to live in that place. The second season of the anime begins by introducing Lasty Moon, the dragon in the form of a woman, known for her eccentric way, who is currently responsible for the diplomatic relations of the Great Tree Village. She appears alongside Florin, the daughter of a count, and together they conduct a kind of tour around the village. The place, which was once small and simple, has grown a lot, and now it is already possible to see the great extension of the agricultural lands around it. The elves mainly take care of the plantations, including the tomatoes served in the meals, while the mountain elves are responsible for the manufacture of tools and manual work, acting as blacksmiths. Curiously, contrary to what many would imagine, it is not the dwarves who occupy this role. The dwarves, in fact, are in charge of the production of alcoholic beverages. Meanwhile, Hakurin continues busy with her tasks, and the administration of the village is under the care of Yurushi, Tia, and Ria. Flora appears in a curious situation, being responsible for recording a presentation video of the village for new visitors. Soon after, Hiraku is introduced as the mayor or leader of the village. At the moment, the Great Tree Village is extremely busy, as everyone prepares to receive more than 100 new residents. Faced with this, Hiraku suggests separating a new area to accommodate these people, which starts the work of clearing the forest. Meanwhile, the needlefish and the lakes ensure a good amount of food, together with Kuro and the others, while the children are in charge of hunting. The young people of the village are excited, but also quite nervous about the arrival of the new inhabitants, which makes them train intensely. Later, to relieve the tension, Aang delivers some sandwiches to Hiraku, who is surprised to realize how well they are made. Upon tasting them, he comments that they are so tasty that they make you want to keep eating even while working. As Florin is very busy, Hiraku decides to take some sandwiches to her. Upon arriving, he finds the girls facing an enormous amount of documents. Rosalina, Royo, and CL Class C complain about the endless work. Hakurin, Flora, and others are supposedly helping. But Hakurin ends up hindering more than helping, causing confusion by provoking sneezes and messing everything up. Hiraku tries to calm the situation, saying that Florin will bring reinforcements soon. Shortly after, Florin appears accompanied by new recruits coming directly from the Demon Kingdom, who were sent to help with social organization. She quickly puts everyone to work, and the newcomers show efficiency in structuring the administrative team. However, when some of them encounter Sabuto and Kuro, they end up getting quite frightened. Later, Gran Maria meets with Hiraku and informs him that she has already analyzed the area intended for the new residents and that she found no danger. Then, Ria arrives and reveals that she was the one who requested the inspection. In addition to inviting Hiraku to get to know the place, he asks if they need to take food for the trip. But Ria explains that it will not be necessary, since the destination is not so far. She also comments that the proximity to the river may offer a strategic advantage. When Hiraku questions what kind of advantage that would be, Ria explains that it is about security in a possible worst-case scenario. When asked what scenario that would be, she answers that it could be a rebellion, and that it is better to be prepared. Upon arriving at the place, Hiraku is surprised to see another enormous tree similar to the one in the original village. After analyzing the area, the needlefish and the elves begin to clear a path through the forest, trying to cut down the trees, but they cannot advance much. In the end, they ask for help from Hiraku, who takes on the task of cutting the trees and opening the way. The wood obtained is used to build a simple bridge, since Ria explains that a larger structure could facilitate the passage of dangerous monsters. After that, Hiraku also takes care of cleaning around the new tree and begins the construction of a channel to bring water from the river to the new village. Dee comments that they have progressed too fast and that it is already time for Hiraku to rest, since practically everything has already been done. He agrees, and the needlefish take over the construction of the houses. Even so, Hiraku cannot stay still and uses his free time to create a statue of a Sabuto. Barushi appears and scolds him for not resting as he should, and in the end he ends up giving in and decides to follow the advice. During this moment, he reflects on how, in the past, he had difficulties building his small cabin alone, while now, with everyone's help and the use of magic, raising houses has become something much easier. In a short time, the elves quickly build the structures of the dwellings, while the mountain elves demonstrate their impressive strength, which ends up leaving the needlefish a little apprehensive. As a precaution, they even put up a notice prohibiting the throwing of wood, prioritizing safety. As time passes, the new village begins to take shape. Ria asks Hiraku exactly how many people are about to arrive, but he does not know the exact number. At that moment, Gran Maria appears bringing a message from Drime, informing that he is already accompanying the new residents. Then, the scene shifts to Drime in human form, who apologizes for the urgency of the situation, saying that it is more serious than it seemed. Hiraku comments that he could have sent a messenger, and Drime explains that he tried to do so using a messenger dog, but he was not sure if it would manage to arrive. Without wasting time, Drime presents a group of minotaurs who wish to move to the village. Hiraku did not expect this, and then Gordon, the leader of the minotaurs, steps forward and explains that his people were expelled from their lands and spent a long time wandering without a destination, seeking support. Drime explains to Hiraku that, just like in the case of the minotaurs, there were many children among them, which made the situation even more delicate. For this reason, he acted with such haste. Hiraku then asks how many people were involved, and upon discovering that there were 72 individuals, he decides not to waste time and organizes the preparation of food for everyone. As they still do not know the customs of the minotaurs well, they choose something simple, preparing rice porridge to receive them. At that moment, Narf, one of the needlefish, appears and tells Hiraku that he has already lived among the minotaurs for a while, so he believes he can communicate better with them and understand their needs. Hiraku allows him to help, and Narf immediately goes to fulfill that role. Sometime later, Hiraku notices an important problem. the houses that were built are not suitable for the size of the Minotaurs. Faced with this, they are temporarily taken to a larger building, and Hiraku decides that it will be better to reserve the newly built village for other residents and plan a new space specifically for the Minotaurs. While they think about this, Florin appears informing that her father has already arrived accompanied by more refugees. Hiraku goes to meet them and finds Crone completely exhausted, after having searched for survivors of the war to bring them to the village. The situation became so complicated that he needed to use teleportation magic to save a large number of people. Hiraku recommends that he rest, and then goes to meet the newcomers, who are centaurs, also of large size. Among them, a representative of the Minotaurs shows a not very friendly attitude, warning Hiraku to be careful with his actions and demanding a formal introduction. Even a little nervous, Hiraku introduces himself as the leader of the village. The Minotaur identifies herself as Giruald, a relative of a viscount, and suggests that Hiraku should be cautious when dealing with her. She continues complaining about the waiting time, but an employee named Leishiasi apologizes and explains that she will need to wait, reminding her that she is now in a safe place under the protection of Count Crone. Hiraku admits that he does not understand much about rules of nobility and prefers to leave this kind of matter to those who understand it. Giruald remains dissatisfied, but Leishiasi reminds her that she is there as someone asking for help, and not in a position of authority. This irritates her, and she reacts with arrogance. But at that moment Tia introduces herself as the daughter of Count Drago. Upon realizing that she is in a lower position in the hierarchy, Giruald completely changes her attitude, apologizes to Hiraku for her previous behavior, and becomes more respectful. Hiraku accepts the apology without creating problems. Tia then asks if she can help in organizing the newcomers, and Hiraku thanks her, but shows concern about the situation in her territory, imagining that the war may still be happening. Tia replies that, as far as she knows, there are no reasons for concern at the moment. Meanwhile, inside the office, some girls comment that Tia is taking too long and probably will not return to help with the paperwork. Later, when evaluating the houses, Hiraku realizes once again that they are too small for the Minotaurs. He considers renovating them, but decides to ask how many refugees still need shelter. Giruald answers that there are about 40 adults and 64 children. Faced with this, Rurushi suggests that they be temporarily taken to the dungeon in the south, sharing space with the Lamias. The idea seems good to some, but Ria questions why. Then, they built the new village. Hiraku simply asks them not to complicate the situation even more. Shortly after, another group arrives at the village, brought by the Lamias. They are different young ones, and when they are introduced, they barely speak. Hiraku finds it strange a log that they are carrying, thinking that it would be for sitting, but soon discovers that the log itself is called Eeg. He explains that the girls are novices, called Daphne, being similar to forest spirits, capable of transforming into plants. The problem is that, when they are in that form and are attacked by monsters, they lose the ability to transform back again for a while. Eeg also reveals that he can assume the form of a small log to make transportation easier. He says that their lands were destroyed after humans cut down many trees, and that they ended up heading to the Forest of Death. On the way, they met a merchant named Michael, who spoke about Hiraku's village. Upon hearing this, Hiraku realizes that they went through many difficulties and decides to offer food. When he asks what they want to eat, Eeg says that they do not need anything. But after insistence, he asks only for some fruits, remembering something he saw with Michael. He comments that, if that place produces fruits at that level, then the soil must be excellent. Hiraku then understands that they feed on the land, and takes them to an empty cultivation area. There, they show satisfaction, explaining that they only need clean water, sunlight, and good quality soil. Observing their size, Hiraku imagines that he has finally found ideal residents to occupy the houses already built. However, Eeg makes it clear that they prefer to stay outdoors. Hiraku still tries to convince them, but there is no change in their decision. Meanwhile, the young Minotaurs occupy the temporary houses, and the centaurs begin to use the stables. Thus, the newly built village ends up remaining empty for now, and everyone realizes that it will be necessary to focus on building new suitable dwellings for these new and large inhabitants. Ria becomes quite excited when the subject is construction, and soon encourages everyone to start the work without delay. Some time later, Hiraku gathers the leaders of each race to apologize for not yet having suitable housing ready for everyone. He also asks for help in deciding where each group will be able to settle. Grudwell responds that she will do everything as ordered. Hiraku tries to make her act more naturally, but notices the signals that Leishiasi is giving and follows her guidance, allowing Grudwell to raise her head and act with more confidence, while making it clear that he expects a lot from her in the future. Grudwell becomes encouraged by this, and Leishiasi praises Hiraku for his attitude. Next, Hiraku organizes representatives for each group. After choosing new locations for the Minotaurs and Centaurs, Hiraku asks for help from Lasti and Hakurin to open paths through the forest. The two become excited, take their dragon forms, and ask how much of the forest they should burn. Hiraku quickly says that it is not necessary to destroy anything like that and asks them to return to human form. Even so, they start cutting down trees with great enthusiasm, and Hakurin, being competitive, tries to open an even larger path, provoking Lasti. The dispute begins to get out of control, until Hiraku intervenes to prevent a greater disaster in the forest. After opening the paths, Hiraku and the others work on creating channels that bring water from the river to the new villages. During this process, Leishiasi demonstrates much better control of her own strength. At the same time, in another place, and meets Rurushi and delivers new clothes made for little Alfred, with designs created by Zabuton. Meanwhile, Hiraku visits the second village, where larger houses are being built. Everything there is adapted to the size of the Minotaurs, including the beds, designed so that their horns do not get in the way. The Centaur dwellings are also ready, but they resemble stables, which makes sense given their body structure. Since they have difficulty with regular doors, they choose to use curtains, and on rainy days they use sliding doors. Overall, everything works well in the Great Tree villages. Alfred, on the other hand, is a little irritated at that moment and asks Rurushi to let her handle it and quickly manages to make him smile. Rurushi is impressed and asks her to teach the trick, but Anne replies that it is a mother's secret. Thus, time passes, and in about a month, thanks to collective effort, the villages are practically completed. Just before the arrival of winter, Florin then asks Hiraku what names will be given to the new villages. He suggests dividing them by zones, such as upper, middle, and lower, but thinks it does not sound good and decides to use simple names like Village 1, 2, and 3, at least temporarily. Florin insists that he choose definitive names soon to avoid problems with documents. Hiraku agrees, and Tia suggests that Village 1 remain unnamed for now, since it has no residents yet. She also proposes Gordon as leader of Village 2 and Grudwell as leader of Village 3. However, the issue of hierarchies arises, and some people begin suggesting exaggerated titles like Great Mayor or Super Mayor. Hiraku asks them to stop that. At that moment, Eeg appears and asks if there will be a village for the Daphne. Hiraku explains that there are no plans for that, which makes Eeg a little sad. However, he soon reveals another idea. He intends to spread the Daphne in strategic points so they can act as observers and messengers, since they can communicate in a way similar to telepathy. In addition, they could also serve as natural lighting during the night. Eeg finds the proposal excellent. With the new residents settling in, Hiraku begins thinking about assigning tasks to each group. However, whenever they see Zabuton or Kuro, some of them faint from fear. Narf then comments that there is a problem. Despite their imposing appearance, Minotaurs and Centaurs are not good hunters. Many of the Centaurs are refugees without combat experience. Hiraku did not expect this, since normally the Inferno wolves handle security. Tia reminds him that these wolves are extremely strong, so Hiraku decides to assign Kuro and Zabuton as responsible for the village's defense. The residents begin working in agriculture, but realize that the soil is not as fertile as they expected. Hiraku understands that he could only farm before because of his special tool, and that he cannot rely solely on it to support all the villages. With Gordon's help, they begin cultivating wheat in a traditional way. Even though it is a slower process, Recognizing the importance of agriculture, Hiraku decides to build a shrine and statues in honor of the god of the area. Although the representation causes confusion, even irritating the goddess herself. Meanwhile, each group takes on roles. Minotaurs take care of the fields and centaurs organize a transportation system. Hiraku also tries to learn how to ride, creating a curious situation in which a horse and Grudwell, a centaur, enter into rivalry to become his main mount. Over time, the villages develop and become more self-sufficient. But Hiraku still worries about his dependence on himself and his tool. In conversation with Rarushi, he reflects on the future while taking care of his son Alfred. Finally, noticing the imbalance between men and women in the village, Hiraku tries to understand how relationships work between the races. However, while talking to Grudwell, a misunderstanding occurs, and she ends up offering herself as a partner, leaving the situation awkward and ending the moment on a tense note. This is the second winter since we started living in this forest. Every year the snow falls heavily and the work in the fields simply stops. The routine becomes different. Everyone goes into a waiting mode, surviving on what was stored before, food and firewood. This time, a new village joined the group, so the number of people increased a lot. At first, there was concern about whether the supplies would be enough, but the stock is not decreasing as expected. In fact, the consumption is much lower than predicted, less than a third of the original calculation. That does not mean that nothing is being used, just that the people here eat much less than planned. Apparently, living in this place made everyone save without realizing it. There are even those who say that this has become an automatic habit. But this excess of control can also become a problem. If it continues like this, vegetables, meat, and other perishable foods will end up spoiling in the storage. The suggested solution is simple: make everyone eat more to balance the stock. The idea seemed easy to accept, so the decision was to take this to the residents immediately. Meanwhile, someone also went to check the warehouses to make sure of everything. In another part of the village, a doubt arises about the new inhabitants, like the so-called New Daphne, but there is no problem with them. In fact, they do not even need food at the same level as the others, and when they enter tree form, they do not even feel cold. Sometimes, they even end up being found buried in the snow without even noticing it. In the middle of this, a curious detail appears, a request coming from Reno Palos and other residents. They ask for something simple from the new Daphne, that she wears clothes when she takes on human form. The explanation is direct: she usually forgets. The message is passed along without conflict, and everything is resolved calmly. In the winter, the preparations for a typical seasonal food begin. The idea is to make something different with rice. Some notice by the smell that something is being prepared and soon start asking what is happening. It is discovered that they are making machai, using a large mortar and special rice. It is not just any rice, but a stickier type, suitable for this preparation. The process seems simple in theory: pound and knead until it becomes dough. But in practice, it is much more tiring. The rhythm requires strength and coordination, and any mistake completely changes the result. Even so, everyone ends up participating in some way, trying to help or to taste. After several attempts and adjustments, the machai finally begins to take the correct shape. Little by little, with more people joining, the preparation becomes stable and works. When everything is ready, the variations for eating begin. With sugar and soy sauce, with kanako, with edamame paste, and even versions with hot sweet beans. Each one has a different texture and sensation, but all of them match the intense cold. A version made with forest herbs also appears, bringing a fresher and unique flavor. The collection of these herbs is not simple. It requires care and preparation, since the forest environment can be unpredictable. In the middle of the celebration, a drink made from fermented rice also appears. It is served to everyone, bringing more warmth and excitement to the moment. The work of kneading the machai also becomes a kind of collective winter activity, even helping to keep the body active during the cold. In the end, someone from the Minotaur tribe stands out as the most efficient in the preparation task, showing strength and adaptation to the work. But the tranquility is interrupted when a woman suddenly appears and makes an unexpected marriage proposal. The situation catches everyone by surprise. She introduces herself as Gratz Pretoa, leader of a noble house of the demonic kingdom. Her name and position indicate that she is not someone ordinary. She asks the name of the protagonist, who introduces herself as Renana, a minotaur from the village. The atmosphere becomes confused with the presence of such an important person there. It soon becomes clear that the visit is related to political matters. The connection with the village is important for the demonic kingdom, and this explains the sudden arrival of this representative. The visitor wanted to see everything with their own eyes. He barely paid attention to any explanation, just repeated the same reaction. So they ended up bringing him to the village. As soon as he arrived, he declared that he had fallen in love immediately. Without beating around the bush, he asked who the chief was. Hiraku introduced himself. Right after came the direct request. He wanted to know what the conditions were to marry Renana. According to him, he needed the authorization of the village leader before any answer. This generated strangeness. Not every marriage works like that. In some places, families interfere, but it is not a rule, especially for the first wife. The situation became even stranger when they began to dramatize the case as if it were a story of impossible love between different classes, with an escape in the middle of the night and a pursuit. In the end, it looked more like a poorly told kidnapping. Hiraku cuts that off and goes straight to the point. What matters is not position or status, but Renana's will. If she does not want it, there is no permission. And even if she wants it, no pressure, threat, or abuse of power. The decision has to be hers, calmly. The visitor accepts the rules. Now everything depends on her answer. Renana does not know what to do at the moment. It is all too fast. Even so, there are those who hope it works out. The solution found is to start slowly, exchanging letters. The problem is that the guy cannot stop thinking about her. He falls into despair at the idea of losing to another. He decides to abandon everything to stay by her side. The reaction of the others is immediate. Abandoning an important position for this is seen as irresponsible. He insists. He says that he lives for love. The discussion heats up, but he does not back down. Meanwhile, the routine of the village continues. Some new rules were created and seem to be working well. Small tasks go on, like repairs and maintenance. In a lighter moment, a strange request appears. Someone wants nori. No one really understands what it is. After explaining, it becomes clear that it is a seaweed used to wrap food, something that comes from the sea. As no one there has experience, they decide to ask for help from someone who knows. After a few days, they get guidance. The process begins, cutting the seaweed, mixing it with water, and spreading it into thin molds. The initial result looks more like moss than food. Even so, they continue. After drying, it still looks strange, resembling paper. The doubt arises whether that is really edible. The solution is to heat it. When toasted, the seaweed changes color and releases a different smell. It finally begins to look like real food. When they taste it, the reaction is strong. The flavor brings an unexpected sense of familiarity. The crunchy texture and the taste combine well with salt. In addition, it is practical to eat. This opens a new possibility to use it with machai. With everything ready, seaweed, charcoal, and machai, a perfect combination appears. The result is isobe machai, crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. The idea becomes an opportunity. The one who helped with the seaweed suggests a trade. They provide the ingredient, and in return they receive machai. The only problem is the production of suitable rice, which still needs to be organized. Even so, the potential is clear, easy to store, simple to prepare, and with good trade value. The preparation starts with rice seasoned with vinegar, salt, and sugar. With everything ready, it is time to assemble. With the rice already seasoned, the ingredients are placed on top, and everything begins to be carefully rolled using a sushi mat. After forming the roll, it is just necessary to cut it into pieces. In theory, it seems simple, but in practice it does not come out so perfect. The shape is not completely round. Some cuts come out crooked, and the finishing is not the best. Even so, the result impresses. Soon they try another variation. As there is mayonnaise available, they make a different version in the shape of a ball. And since they do not have artificial canny, they use real crab meat. The level rises quickly, even being just a test. It is clear that that has everything to work. Despite the imperfections in the preparation, the flavor draws attention. The slightly acidic smell of the vinegar surprises at first, but it combines better than expected. The appearance also pleases, being something beautiful and easy to eat. Then a practical idea appears to use this in portable meals. The vinegar helps to preserve, reducing the risk of contamination. This opens space to use it in lunch boxes without needing fermentation. Meanwhile, the winter begins to show signs that it is ending. Even with the melting of the snow, the climate is still unstable, and deciding the right moment to plant continues to be a challenge. It is not yet time to start, so the decision is to follow more experienced advice before acting. Before spring arrives, another idea appears to prepare something special for the village. With the growth of the population and new villages appearing, it seems like the right moment to organize an event. The proposal is to make a festival. However, when trying to explain examples, strange and difficult to understand ideas appear, like bizarre competitions and unusual traditions. This only confuses more than it helps. Then the focus changes to something more common: New Year festivals or harvest celebrations. Even so, each person has a different view of what an ideal festival would be. The descriptions conflict, with completely different versions depending on the region. Realizing that they will not reach a consensus, they decide to solve it in a simple way. Each one writes their idea of a festival, and the choice will be made by lottery. When the papers are analyzed, one option draws attention: a martial arts tournament. The proposal is direct fighting and competition. Unlike the other confusing ideas, this one is easy to understand and pleases the group, so the decision is made. The village festival will be a combat tournament. Even being a potentially dangerous event, they treat it as something similar to a sports competition. Now, the next step is to organize everything so that this festival really happens. The following day, Hiraku walks calmly through the village, as he usually does in his routine, carefully observing everything that happens around him. He sees several people busy with their daily activities, each contributing in some way to the functioning of the place. Some are working on common tasks, others are training intensely, while there are also those running from one side to the other, clearly focused on improving their performance. All of that is part of the collective preparation. Since many wish to please the demon lord and show their worth, during his walk, one of the girls comments that in order to maintain the strength of the demonic kingdom, it is necessary to possess great skill in combat and to always keep evolving. Right after saying that, she is called by her friends, who encourage her to run along with them, and the group moves forward excitedly, reinforcing the energetic atmosphere that takes over the village. The environment is especially lively on that day, mainly because the Grand Championship is approaching quickly. Everyone seems excited and determined to give their best at the event. Suddenly, one of the girls decides to step away from the group to train alone, which ends up catching Hiraku's attention. Intrigued by the decision, he approaches and asks for the reason. She responds directly, saying that she has not been using her full strength since she arrived at the village, and that, because of that, she feels the need to practice in a more serious and intense way. Hiraku understands her point, recognizing her dedication, but he also understands the risk involved. He knows that if she releases all of her power without control, there is a real possibility of causing significant damage to the village. Thinking carefully, Hiraku concludes that he cannot allow her to participate directly in the competitions. Instead, he finds a safer alternative and invites her to act as a referee in the games. The girl, however, does not seem very satisfied with the idea and comments that it might end up being boring. Hiraku responds calmly, explaining that it is not a simple or unimportant task. On the contrary, he emphasizes that the role of a referee is essential to ensure that everything happens in a fair and safe way, being perfect for someone with the strength and responsibility that she possesses. Little by little, the proposal begins to make more sense to her. Right after that, another dragon girl also decides to step away to train alone for the championship. Upon noticing the situation, Hiraku understands that he may face the same problem again. Without hesitating, he makes the same decision and invites the second girl to take on the role of referee, making use of her abilities and avoiding unnecessary risks. In this way, he manages to turn a possible problem into an efficient solution. After resolving these issues, Hiraku feels a certain relief and becomes satisfied for having found a safe way to deal with the situation, ensuring both the safety of the village and the participation of the girls in the event. The scene then shifts to Ru and Tia, who are in a more relaxed moment, but still filled with competitiveness. Tia asks why Ru is laughing so much, and she responds with an excited smile that she will finally have the chance to punch her in the face again during the championship. The statement, although it sounds aggressive, is said in an almost playful tone. The two end up competing over the last piece of food available, turning a simple situation into a small contest. The atmosphere between them mixes rivalry and fun, showing how much they are involved with the idea of the tournament. Observing the scene, Hiraku clearly realizes how seriously both of them are taking the championship, even in the small details of everyday life. Meanwhile, Ru's sister intervenes upon noticing the situation and asks the two to avoid fighting in front of the child, trying to maintain a calmer and more appropriate environment. Even with all the excitement and competitive spirit taking over the village, there is still a concern about preserving harmony among everyone. Flora ends up staying out of the fights and takes on an equally important role, that of a healer. Time passes, and finally the long-awaited big day arrives. The ball begins quite lively, with the arrival of several important guests. Among them, Yuri's father draws attention as he presents himself in a simple and direct manner, even though he is the Demon King, avoiding any kind of excessive formality. Shortly after, another visitor also stands out, someone known by the title of Dragon Emperor, but who prefers to be treated in a casual way. Even so, it becomes evident to everyone that only extremely powerful figures are present at that event. With everyone gathered, the tournament finally begins. The Great Tree Village holds, for the first time, an event of this scale, and the structure impresses anyone who looks at it. There is a well-organized VIP area, defined spaces, and a level of logistics that shows care with every detail. The rules are clear and straightforward. One-on-one fights, decided by drawing lots. Victory can be achieved by knocking down the opponent or by destroying the magical band attached to their head. Right from the first fight, everyone realizes that this is not something light or merely recreational. The level of the fighters is already high from the very beginning. Even with some injuries happening throughout the matches, the healing team, led by Flora, keeps everything under control efficiently. Meanwhile, the audience reacts intensely, alternating between excitement and surprise, realizing that the tournament is much more serious than they had imagined. The fights continue at a fast pace and with great variety of styles. Some fighters demonstrate impressive experience, while others still show that they have much to learn. Even so, all of them participate with determination. At a certain moment, one of the battles ends almost instantly. The tournament progresses gradually until it reaches the final of the general division. Frau and Sina face each other in a balanced fight, where neither of them manages to gain a clear advantage. They move into direct confrontation, exchanging blows with intensity and precision. At the decisive moment, both land their attacks at the same time, resulting in a fair draw. The fight ends in a respectful manner, marking the conclusion of this phase with balance and mutual recognition. The winners receive their rewards, and the overall atmosphere is one of satisfaction among participants and spectators. However, it becomes clear that this was only the beginning. Soon after, the next stage is announced, the Warriors Division. Unlike the previous division, here there are no strict limitations. Everything is allowed, the use of weapons is permitted, and victory can come by knockout or surrender. Only those who can truly withstand this level of combat enter the competition. The first fight of this new phase places Uno from the Hell Wolves tribe face to face with Junya from the Lamia tribe. The confrontation is intense from the very beginning, with Uno demonstrating impressive strength and technique. Even facing difficult moments, he manages to dominate the fight and secure the victory. Next, Daga faces an unusual creature, directly connected to Zabuton. The combat begins in an apparently favorable way, but it quickly changes direction. With no room to retreat or reorganize, Daga ends up being defeated. The battles continue, becoming increasingly intense and demanding. Strategy, strength, and endurance are tested at extreme levels. In the midst of all this, some fighters demonstrate absolute confidence, making it clear that the level of the tournament can still rise far beyond what has already been shown. During one of the fights, an important point emerges. Carrying a heavy weapon can become a major disadvantage. The opponent realizes this immediately and decides to concentrate all their magic into a single decisive attack. The resulting explosion comes dangerously close to ending the fight at that very moment. Even so, Yar cannot withstand the pressure and ends up surrendering, securing the victory for Gulf. In the following fight, there is a change in the rules. Falling off the stage is no longer a criterion for elimination, since some combatants have the ability to fly, which would create an unfair advantage. A new fighter enters the scene using a different weapon. He explains that he avoids spears because he loses control when using them. And now, with a lighter weapon, he intends to fight without restrictions. The fight begins in a balanced way. Both fighters test the distance, carefully observe each other's movements, and exchange attacks cautiously. At a certain moment, a trick is revealed. The weapon, despite appearing heavy, is actually much lighter than it seems. This completely disrupts the opponent's reading. Even so, neither of them manages to finish the fight. Both reach their limits at the same time, and the combat ends in a draw. But even after that, the level continues to rise. The following fights become even faster and more aggressive. Liu enters the scene and resolves his fight quickly, without giving the opponent any chance to react, achieving a clean victory. Next, another battle begins at an absurd pace. The movements are so fast that almost no one can follow them with their eyes. Only after a few moments is it possible to understand what is really happening. The fight evolves into a direct exchange of blows. There are no complex strategies, only brute force and endurance. The two combatants advance against each other, continuously trading punches, as if they were enjoying themselves more than competing. In the end, one of them manages to come out on top by a minimal margin. With that, the final of the Warriors division is decided. After an intense sequence of fights, McClar stands out and secures the title. The award ceremony takes place soon after, with general recognition from both the audience and the participants. Everyone agrees that the level of the fights exceeded any initial expectations. When everything seems to have come to an end, there is still one more surprise. The audience, excited, asks for another fight. And then a special exhibition is announced between the two who had been acting as judges. As soon as the fight begins, the impact is immediate and impressive. The collision of the first attacks generates an explosion so intense that it can be seen from a distance. Part of the event structure is destroyed, including some food stalls, but curiously, the beverage area remains intact. The fight continues intensely from beginning to end. Hakurin ends up coming out victorious, while Rusty demonstrates clear growth, although it is still not enough to win. Even so, the combat impresses everyone present. Some spectators, still excited, ask for more fights and even suggest new challenges, although not everyone takes these ideas seriously. In the end, despite some structural damage, the event is considered a great success. The overall atmosphere is positive, with everyone satisfied with what was presented. The festival fulfilled everything it promised and even exceeded expectations. When the question arises about repeating the event in the future, the answer comes with a certain hesitation. Perhaps it is better not to do something of this level again so soon.
Shawty, give me a reason. You know that